Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. The security camera in the lobby hasn't worked for 3 weeks. I know because I've been meaning to call maintenance about it. That detail sticks in my mind now. Maybe if it had been working, I'd have proof of what I saw that night at Lakeside Resort. I'd been doing the night shift at the front desk for 8 months. Not much happens after midnight at a lakefront resort in October. The summer crowds are gone. The fall colors have faded. Most nights I just do paperwork and watch Netflix on my phone. That changed on October 12th. The wind picked up around 1 a.m., rattling the front windows. Temperature dropped fast. I could feel the draft coming through the revolving door. Only 3 rooms were occupied that night. A business traveler in 204, an elderly couple in 312, and a family with 2 kids in 318. I'd checked them all in myself during the afternoon shift before staying on for night duty. I was updating the maintenance log when movement caught my eye through the lobby windows. A man walking across the front lawn toward the lake. He wore an old-style suit, the kind with high-waisted pants and wide lapels. Dark fabric, maybe navy blue. A fedora on his head. Who wears a fedora these days? The way he walked seemed wrong, smooth, almost gliding, like his feet barely touched the grass. And despite the wind whipping the trees around, his clothes didn't move at all. I grabbed my flashlight and key card. Resort policy says we have to check on any guests outside after midnight. Liability issues. Plus something felt off about this guy. "Sir?" I called out as I pushed through the front door. The wind hit me hard, cold enough to make my eyes water. "Sir, the lakefront is closed after dark." He kept walking, heading straight for the water's edge. I jogged to catch up, boots crunching on frost-covered grass. The beam of my flashlight bounced off his back but seemed dimmer than usual, like the light couldn't quite reach him. "Hey, you need to come back inside." 20 feet behind him now, close enough to see more details of his clothes. The suit wasn't just old-fashioned. It looked like something from a black and white movie. The fabric had a weird sheen to it, almost translucent in my flashlight beam. He reached the wooden boardwalk that runs along the lakeshore. His shoes made no sound on the planks. Mine thundered with each step. "Stop right there!" I was running now, closing the gap, 10 feet away. The man paused at the very edge of the boardwalk. Slowly, he turned his head to look back at me. My flashlight beam went right through him. I mean that literally. I could see the lake through his body, like he was made of smoke or dirty glass. His face, Jesus, his face. Pale as milk except for dark hollows where his eyes should have been. My legs locked up. The flashlight slipped from my numb fingers and clattered on the boardwalk. The man's mouth opened in what might have been a smile, showing nothing but blackness inside. Then he stepped forward. Not onto the water, into it. Like walking through a doorway. No splash, no ripples. 1 second he was there. The next, he had vanished completely. I stood frozen for maybe 5 minutes, staring at the spot where he'd disappeared. The wind died down. The lake went flat as glass, my chest hurt, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. Finally, training and procedure kicked in. I retrieved my flashlight with shaking hands and swept the beam across the water's surface. Nothing but small waves lapping at the pylons. I checked the boardwalk and surrounding shore for footprints. Only mine were visible in the frost. Back inside, I pulled up the guest registry on the computer. Clicked through every check-in for the past week. No single male guests besides the businessman in 204, who I'd seen heading up to his room hours ago with his laptop bag. I opened the emergency procedures manual. Nothing about ghost sightings. Typical. My hands were still trembling as I picked up the phone to call Jerry, the hotel manager. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. "Hey Jerry, it's Mark at the front desk. Sorry to call so late, but, something weird just happened. Can you call me back when you get this? It's kind of important." I spent the next hour going through security footage, but the cameras only covered the parking lot and back entrance. Nothing showing the lakefront where I'd seen whatever I'd seen. Around 3 a.m. I started digging through the resort's old files. Most were digitized now, but we kept paper records going back to the 1930s in a storage room behind the front desk. Yellowed ledgers and guest books filled with elegant handwriting. I'm not sure what made me check October specifically, just a hunch. Flipping through decade after decade of October guest lists. Nothing jumped out until I hit 1943. The handwriting was different in that book. Messier, like whoever was recording guests was in a hurry, or upset about something. And there on the page for October 12, 1943, exactly 81 years ago, was an entry that made my blood run cold. Mr. James Harrison, room 127. Note, guest failed to check out. Personal effects found in room. Police report filed. I pulled out my phone and Googled Lakeside Resort Harrison 1943. The third result was a newspaper article from the local paper's online archives. Businessman's disappearance baffles police. October 14, 1943. Local authorities are investigating the mysterious disappearance of James Harrison, 47, from the Lakeside Resort. Harrison, a traveling salesman from Chicago, was last seen by hotel staff late Tuesday evening. His room was found undisturbed Wednesday morning, containing his luggage and other belongings, including his wallet and identification. A resort employee reported seeing Harrison walking near the lake around midnight, but extensive searches of the grounds and water have yielded no clues to his whereabouts. The rest of the article was behind a paywall, but I'd seen enough. I searched through more recent newspapers next. Every few years, there would be another article, another sighting. Always in October, always late at night. A man in a 1940 suit walking toward the lake. The sun was coming up by the time Jerry called back. "Mark, got your message. What's so important it couldn't wait until morning?" I told him everything. The man in the suit, the way he vanished into the lake, the old guest records, the newspaper articles. Jerry was quiet for a long time after I finished. "How long you been working here, Mark?" 8 months. "Then you wouldn't know about the others. Night staff who've seen him. We don't exactly advertise it, bad for business. But it happens every few years. Always the same description. Always October 12th. Why didn't anyone tell me? Would you have believed it if we had? Look, your shift's almost over. Go home, get some sleep. We can talk more about this tomorrow." "What happened to him? Harrison? Did they ever find out?" Another long pause. "Police dragged the lake back in 43. Found nothing. But there were rumors, stories about gambling debts, Chicago mob connections, the kind of thing that got people disappeared back then. Nothing was ever proven." I looked out the lobby windows at the lake. The surface was pink with dawn light. Peaceful, normal. What do I do if he comes back? He won't. Not until next October 12th. But if you're still working nights, then just let him be. He's never hurt anyone. Just walking the same path over and over. Looking for something or trying to tell us something. Who knows? I think I need a drink. Go home, Mark. Get some rest. And welcome to the club. Not everyone gets to see him. Consider yourself special. I hung up and gathered my things to leave. The day shift person would be here soon. As I waited, I kept glancing at the lake through the windows. The sun was fully up now, turning the water golden. Hard to believe what I'd seen just hours ago. A family came down for breakfast, the ones from 318. The kids pressed their faces against the lobby windows, pointing at ducks swimming near the shore. Their mother called them to the dining room. Normal tourist stuff, normal morning. But I knew I'd be back tonight, and tomorrow night, and every night until I figured out what really happened to James Harrison, what he was trying to tell us, why he kept returning to walk that same path to the lake. The front door chimed as the day shift person walked in. Time to go home. But as I drove away, I couldn't shake the image of that face turning to look at me. Those dark, empty eyes. That black void of a mouth. And I wondered, what if he's not trying to tell us something? What if he's warning us? warning us about whatever's waiting in the lake. Whatever took him on that October night 81 years ago. I guess I'll find out. October 12th comes around every year, and now I know what to watch for. But next time I'm bringing a camera that works, and I'm not letting him reach the water. I have questions for James Harrison, and I think he has answers, whether I want to hear them or not. The first time I smelled her perfume, I was reshelving books in the medieval history section. I'd worked at the Morgan Heights Library for 15 years, and I knew every creak of the hardwood floors, every draft that whistled through the century-old windows. But that scent, lilacs mixed with something older, mustier, that was new. My nose twitched. The smell didn't belong. I set down the cart of books and checked my watch. 9:45 p.m. The library had been closed for nearly 2 hours. I was alone, like always, during my night shift. The security guard, Pete, only patrolled the exterior. The perfume grew stronger. A chill ran up my spine, and the hair on my arm stood up. I heard the soft tap of footsteps behind me, but when I turned, the aisle was empty. Just rows of leather-bound books stretching into shadow where the motion sensor lights hadn't activated. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've encountered her, or it, or whatever it is, dozens of times. Always after closing. Always when I'm alone. Tonight started like any other night. I locked the front doors at 8 p.m. sharp after the last student trudged out with an armful of textbooks. I did my usual walkthrough of all 4 floors, checking for stragglers in the study rooms and between the stacks. Finding none, I grabbed my cleaning cart and started my nightly routine. The Morgan Heights Library isn't just any library. Built in 1886, it's one of the oldest buildings in town. Red brick exterior, gleaming copper dome, elaborate woodwork inside that would cost a fortune to replicate today. The kind of place that belongs in a movie about haunted Victorian mansions. I started on the ground floor, dusting shelves and straightening chairs. Everything normal. The usual creaks and settling noises of an old building. The hum of the ancient heating system. My shoes squeaking on the polished floors. When I reached the second floor, my skin prickled. The temperature dropped at least 10 degrees between the stairwell and the main reading room. I could see my breath. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing off the high ceiling. No answer. I pushed my cart toward the reference section, pretending everything was fine. But my hands shook as I sprayed cleaner on the study tables. That's when I caught the first whiff of lilac. My stomach clenched. I gripped the edge of the table, steadying myself. The perfume grew stronger, mixing with the sharp smell of the cleaning spray. Footsteps behind me. Soft, like someone walking in slippers. I forced myself to turn around slowly. She stood at the end of the aisle, about 30 feet away. A woman in a high-necked blue dress that brushed the floor, her dark hair piled on top of her head in an elaborate style I'd only seen in old photographs. She was slightly transparent. I could make out the spine labels on the books through her body. My throat went dry. I'd seen glimpses before. A flash of movement, a shadow that shouldn't be there, but never this clear, never for this long. She didn't move like a person, more like how smoke drifts through the air. One moment she was at the end of the aisle. The next she had glided halfway toward me without taking a step. I backed away, bumping into my cart. Spray bottles clattered to the floor. The sound echoed through the empty library. The woman stopped. Her face turned toward the noise. That's when I noticed her eyes, or rather, the lack of them. Where eyes should have been, there were only dark hollows. My legs went weak. I gripped the cart harder, my knuckles turning white. The woman's head tilted like she was studying me. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "What do you want?" I whispered. She raised one translucent hand and pointed behind me. I didn't want to turn around. Every instinct screamed not to take my eyes off her, but something compelled me to look. She was pointing at the card catalog, the old wooden one we kept for historical display. It hadn't been used in decades, not since everything went digital. When I turned back, she had moved closer. 10 feet away now. The lilac smell was overwhelming. My eyes watered. "The card catalog?" I asked. My voice shook. "You want me to look in there?" She nodded. Just once, a slight dip of her chin. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the catalog. The woman drifted back, giving me space. My hands trembled as I pulled open one of the thin drawers. Hundreds of yellowed cards covered in faded typewriter ink. "Which one?" I asked. She pointed again, more insistently. I started flipping through cards. Nothing jumped out at me. Just standard library classifications, author names, titles. The temperature dropped lower. My teeth chattered. Frost formed on the wooden drawer. "I don't understand what you want me to find," I said. She moved closer, 3 feet away now. Close enough that I could see the intricate lace on her collar. Close enough to notice that her dress had water stains around the hem, like she'd been walking in the rain. Her hand reached toward the cards. I flinched back, but she wasn't reaching for me. Her fingers passed through the cards, stopping at one in particular. The card frosted over. I pulled it out with numb fingers. The ink was faded, but I could still make out the text. Morgan, Elizabeth A. Library Director, 1886-1902. My breath caught. Everyone who worked at the library knew about Elizabeth Morgan. She was the first director back when the building opened. She died in her office on the 4th floor. Heart attack, according to the records. I looked up. The woman, Elizabeth, stood directly in front of me now. This close, I could see water dripping from her hair, from her dress. Not rainwater. It was dark, murky, like pond water. The official records were wrong. I knew that now with absolute certainty. Elizabeth Morgan didn't die of a heart attack. She opened her mouth again. This time, a sound came out. Not words, but the gurgle of water in a throat. Water trickled from the corners of her mouth. I ran. Dropped the card, knocked over my cart, and ran for the stairs. Her gurgling followed me. The lilac smell chased me down 3 flights. I didn't stop until I reached the front desk. Slumped against it, gasping for breath. The main floor was warm, normal. No sign of Elizabeth. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and Googled Elizabeth Morgan, Library Director, death, 1902. Most results just repeated the heart attack story. But there was one old newspaper article, scanned and uploaded to the Historical Society's website. The article mentioned that Elizabeth had last been seen working late one stormy night. Her body was found the next morning in her office. The cause of death was listed as heart failure, but the article noted that her clothes were inexplicably soaked through, as if she had been swimming. I read further. Elizabeth had been pushing to expand the library's rare book collection. She'd secured several valuable donations, worth a fortune even back then. The week after her death, 3 of the most valuable books disappeared, never recovered. The pieces clicked together. Someone had killed her, probably drowned her in the ornamental pond that used to be behind the library. Killed her for the books, or to cover up their theft. I looked at my watch. 11:30 p.m. I had another hour left on my shift, but there was no way I was going back upstairs. Not tonight. I pulled out my phone again and started digging deeper into the library's history. If Elizabeth was trying to tell me something, I needed to figure out what it was. Over the next few weeks, I developed a routine. During the day, I researched everything I could find about Elizabeth Morgan and the missing books. At night, I waited for her to appear. She came more frequently now, always after closing. Always on the 2nd floor near the card catalog. The pattern was the same. Temperature drop, lilac smell, footsteps. Sometimes she just watched me from the end of an aisle. Sometimes she tried to show me things. Specific books, old photographs on the walls, filing cabinet drawers. I started keeping notes. Which books she pointed to. Which photographs caught her attention. Slowly, a picture emerged. Elizabeth had been working with a private collector, arranging to purchase several rare medieval manuscripts. The collector died mysteriously 2 days after Elizabeth. His house burned down the same night, destroying all records of the transaction. The current value of the missing books, adjusted for inflation, over $5 million. I traced what happened to the library staff from that time period. Most had mundane stories, retirements, moves to other cities, normal deaths years later. But one name stuck out: James Crawford, Elizabeth's assistant director. He quit suddenly a month after her death, moved to Europe, and over the next several years he sold several rare books to private collectors. Books matching the descriptions of the ones that disappeared from the library. Tonight I brought printouts of everything I'd found, spread them out on a study table on the second floor. Photos, articles, records. "Is this what you've been trying to tell me?" I asked the empty air. "About Crawford?" The lilac smell filled the air. Elizabeth appeared beside the table. She looked different tonight, more solid somehow. The hollow eye sockets were now filled with pale blue eyes. She nodded. "He killed you," I said. "For the books." She pointed to one of the photographs, an old staff picture from 1901. Crawford stood next to Elizabeth, hand on her shoulder, smiling at the camera. "You trusted him," I said. Water dripped from her dress, forming a puddle on the floor, but her eyes were clear now, focused on me. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Crawford is long dead. The books are probably scattered in private collections across Europe." She shook her head and pointed to a different paper, a shipping manifest I'd found dated 1903. It listed 3 crates of books sent from Crawford's address in London to a storage facility in our town. My eyes widened. "They never left? The books are still here somewhere?" Elizabeth nodded. She drifted toward the window and pointed outside, toward the old industrial district. Most of those buildings were abandoned now, but some of the old storage facilities were still standing. "You want me to find them," I said, "to bring them back to the library." She smiled, the first time I'd seen her do that. The effect was unsettling with her pale eyes and water-bloated features, but I understood the sentiment. "Okay," I said. "I'll try. But this is going to take time, and I'll need help. Someone with authority to actually recover the books if we find them." Elizabeth's form started to fade. The lilac smell grew fainter. "Will you help me?" I asked quickly. "Show me where to look." She nodded once more before disappearing completely. The temperature returned to normal. The puddle of water was gone, leaving no trace it had ever been there. I gathered up my papers with shaking hands. Part of me still couldn't believe I was doing this, following the instructions of a ghost to solve a century-old theft. But I knew what I'd seen, what I'd been seeing for months now. Tomorrow I'd start making calls to the Historical Society, to the police department's cold case division, to the library board. Someone would listen, and with Elizabeth's help, we'd find those books. I looked at my watch. 12:30 a.m., end of my shift. As I packed up my cleaning cart, I caught one last whiff of lilac perfume. "Good night, Elizabeth," I said softly. The scent lingered for a moment, then faded away. But I knew she'd be back tomorrow night. We had work to do. The first time I heard the footsteps, I was doing my 2 a.m. round in the science building. I stopped walking. They stopped too. I started again. They followed. This wasn't how I planned to spend my retirement years, jumping at shadows in empty hallways. I took this night security job at Preston Valley Community College 3 months ago. Good pay, easy work, they said. Just walk around, check the doors, write reports. Perfect for a former postal worker looking to keep busy. The day shift supervisor handed me the keys, showed me the routes, and that was that. The campus sprawls across 30 acres, 5 main buildings, all brick and glass, connected by covered walkways. Science building in the north, liberal arts to the south, student center in the middle. Library and administration flank the east and west. At night, motion sensor lights click on as I walk. They snap off behind me, leaving darkness in my wake. That first night with the footsteps, I radioed Dave at the security desk. "Got someone in science, second floor?" Negative, Dave said. Cameras show all clear. Just you up there. I kept walking. The footsteps shadowed me, always 3 or 4 paces behind. The sound was light, like someone in soft shoes trying to walk quietly. When I reached the stairwell, I spun around fast. Empty hallway. Just rows of closed classroom doors and dark windows reflecting the emergency lights. I wrote it off as echoes. Old buildings make weird sounds. But the next night, they came back. Same soft steps, same distance. I started varying my routine, taking different routes each night. The steps followed me through every building, upstairs, down halls. After 2 weeks, I got bold. I'd stop suddenly, wait 5 minutes, then start walking backward. The steps would begin again, still behind me, like they knew which way I faced. I set up my phone to record the sound. The recording picked up my boots on the tile, but nothing else. I started dreading the night shifts. My heart would race when I heard those steps start up. Sweat would roll down my back even in the air conditioning. I'd find myself walking faster and faster until I was almost running, those soft footfalls keeping pace behind me. The head of security noticed the circles under my eyes. "Everything okay, Jack? You look tired." "Fine," I said, "just not sleeping great." I couldn't tell him I was going crazy over phantom footsteps. He'd think I was losing it. Last night something changed. I was checking the 3rd floor of liberal arts when the steps started. But this time, they were closer. Much closer. I could almost feel breath on my neck. My hands shook as I gripped my flashlight. I broke into a run. The steps ran with me, right on my heels. I sprinted down the hallway, heart pounding. At the end of the corridor, I slammed through the fire door into the stairwell. The door caught on something as it swung shut. Just for a second, but long enough. Long enough for me to hear a soft laugh behind me. I called in sick tonight. Told them I had the flu. I'm sitting here at my kitchen table staring at my uniform hanging by the door. My shift starts in an hour. The phone's ringing. Probably Dave wondering if I'm coming in. My hands won't stop shaking. Because now I know something's following me in those halls. Something that's getting braver, getting closer. And sooner or later it's going to catch up. But I need this job. The bills won't pay themselves. So I'll put on that uniform. I'll clip on that badge. I'll walk those dark hallways again. And I'll listen for footsteps. The college looks different tonight. The familiar buildings loom larger, their shadows deeper. I punch in at the security desk. Dave gives me a look but doesn't mention my absence yesterday. "Quiet night so far," he says, eyes on the bank of monitors. "Maintenance fixed that squeaky door in science." I nod, check my equipment. Flashlight, radio, keys. My palms are already sweating. The clock shows 10 p.m., 8 hours to go. I start my first round in administration. The building feels empty, but not the normal empty, like it's holding its breath. My footsteps echo on the tile floor. Just my footsteps. For now. The motion lights click on ahead of me, illuminating the hallway in sections. I check each office door, marking them off in my log. Everything normal. Everything quiet. Too quiet. Then I hear it. That soft step behind me. My heart slams against my ribs. I force myself to keep walking, keep checking doors. The steps follow, closer than ever before. Close enough that I should see someone if I turn around. But I won't turn around. Not this time. I reach the end of the hall. Have to turn left or right. The steps pause, waiting for my choice. Sweat runs down my face. My uniform shirt sticks to my back. "What do you want?" My voice sounds strange in the silence. No answer. Just that patient, waiting presence behind me. I turn left. The steps follow. Right on my heels now. If I stopped suddenly, we'd collide. The thought makes my skin crawl. My radio crackles. "Jack, you okay up there?" Dave's voice makes me jump. Getting some weird shadows on the cameras. I reach for the radio, but my hands are shaking too bad. I drop it. The clatter echoes down the hall. When I bend to pick it up, I feel something brush against my hair. I run. I run like I haven't run in 20 years, breath burning in my chest. The steps run with me, matching my pace exactly. The motion lights can't keep up, leaving me in darkness between bright flashes. I slam through doors, take corners blind, no destination in mind except away. I end up in the library. 3 stories of books and shadows. The main reading room stretches out before me. Tables and chairs, dim shapes in the emergency lighting. I stop, hands on knees, gulping air. The steps stop too, right behind me. What are you? My voice shakes. Why are you following me? A soft laugh, like the one I heard in the stairwell. Then something cold touches the back of my neck. I scream. The sound bounces off the high ceiling, comes back distorted. I sprint between the shelves, knocking books to the floor. The steps follow, unhurried now, like they know I can't escape. My radio crackles again. Jack, where are you? I'm calling the police. I reach the far wall. No doors here, just windows looking out over the dark campus. I spin around, back against the glass. The steps approach slowly, getting closer, closer. I can hear breathing now, not my own. My flashlight beam shows empty air, then the cold touch again, this time on my face, like fingers tracing my cheek. I close my eyes. Please, I whisper. Please leave me alone. The touch withdraws. The breathing stops. When I open my eyes, I'm alone in the library. Really alone. I slide down the wall, sit on the floor. My radio lies silent. Outside, I see police lights approaching the campus. That was 3 days ago. I quit the next morning. Let them keep my last paycheck. The new security guard starts tonight. Young guy, former military. Looks tough. I should warn him about the footsteps, about what waits in those dark hallways. But he wouldn't believe me. I wouldn't have believed me. So I sit here in my apartment, watching the sun set. In an hour, the motion lights will start clicking on across campus. The new guard will begin his rounds. And somewhere in those empty buildings, soft footsteps will start to follow. I keep thinking about that laugh, about those cold fingers on my face. Whatever followed me through those halls, it wasn't human. It never was. And it's still there, waiting for the next person to walk those corridors alone. Sometimes at night, I think I hear footsteps in my apartment building's hallway. Soft steps that stop outside my door. But that's crazy, right? It can't follow me here. Can it? I don't check the hallway anymore when I hear those steps. I just sit very still and wait for them to go away. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. The sun's almost down now. The new guard will be starting his shift. I should call him, should tell him what to expect. But my phone's in the other room, and I hear footsteps in the hallway, getting closer. The night security monitors showed nothing unusual at 2:47 a.m. when I first saw it. Just empty hallways and dark offices on all 12 floors of the Meridian building. But there it was on the 10th floor, a black shape standing motionless by the window. I blinked hard and leaned closer to the grainy screen. The figure didn't move. I've worked security at this building for 6 years. I know every corner, every shadow cast by the streetlights outside. This was different. The shape was roughly human-sized, but somehow wrong. Too dark, too still. My mouth went dry as I stared at it. The radio crackled. "Everything okay down there, Mike?" It was Dave at the front desk. "Yeah," I said, my voice catching. "Just thought I saw something on 10. Probably nothing. Want me to check it out?" "No, I got it." I stood up, my chair squeaking against the floor. Protocol said we had to investigate any possible intrusion, even if it was probably just shadows playing tricks. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. My hand kept drifting to the pepper spray on my belt. The building was locked down tight. Card access only after 6 p.m., motion sensors on every floor, cameras covering every angle. Nobody could have gotten in without us knowing. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. The 10th floor was pitch black except for the faint glow of exit signs and the city lights filtering through the windows. I pulled out my flashlight and swept the beam across the empty cubicles. Nothing moved. My footsteps echoed as I walked toward the window where I'd seen the figure. The space was empty now, just another dark office with generic artwork on the walls and dusty fake plants in the corners. I relaxed slightly and lowered my flashlight. Then something shifted in my peripheral vision, just for a split second. I spun around, heart pounding. The beam caught nothing but more empty cubicles. "Security," I called out. My voice sounded thin in the darkness. "If someone's here, show yourself now." Silence. Just the quiet hum of the ventilation system. I did a thorough sweep of the whole floor, checked every office, conference room, and storage closet. Everything was locked and undisturbed. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Back at my desk, I rewound the security footage. The figure was clearly visible at 2:47 a.m., standing perfectly still by the window for exactly 3 minutes before seeming to fade away. I played it again, and again. There was no glitch, no camera malfunction. Something had been there. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, I've seen it 6 more times. Always at night, always on different floors. Sometimes by the windows, sometimes in doorways or at the end of dark hallways. Never when anyone else is around to verify what I'm seeing. The cameras catch it maybe half the time. I've started documenting every sighting. Night 3, 8th floor, 1:15 a.m. Figure appeared in the break room doorway for approximately 30 seconds. No movement. Disappeared when I reached for my phone to take a photo. Night 5, 4th floor, 3:24 a.m. Saw it reflected in the window of an empty office. Turned around and nothing was there. Caught on camera. Night 7, 12th floor, 11:52 p.m. Standing at the end of the main hallway. Seemed taller than before. Vanished when I blinked. Night 8, 6th floor, 2:33 a.m. In the corner of my eye as I was doing rounds. Gone when I turned to look directly at it. Not on camera. Night 10, 9th floor, 4:17 a.m. By the elevator. Definitely human-shaped, but wrong somehow. Too dark, like a hole in space. Camera footage shows only static for those 2 minutes. Last night was the worst. I was alone in the security office around 3 a.m., watching the monitors as usual. Movement caught my eye on the screen showing the 7th floor. The figure was there, but this time it was facing the camera directly. I felt the blood drain from my face. In all the previous sightings, it had been in profile or facing away. Now I could see where its face should be. Just emptiness, darker than the darkness around it. My hands were shaking as I radioed Dave. "You need to see this." "What's up?" "7th floor camera. Tell me you see it too." A pause. "See what?" "It's empty up there." I looked back at the screen. The figure was gone. But when I rewound the footage, there it was, staring into the camera for a full minute before vanishing. "Never mind," I told Dave. Must have been my imagination. But I knew what I'd seen, and I knew I had to find out what this thing was. I spent my day off researching the building's history. The Meridian was built in 1983, pretty unremarkable except for one incident in 1997. A maintenance worker fell to his death from the 10th floor. The window he was cleaning somehow came loose from its frame. They ruled it an accident, but there were questions about the safety equipment and inspection records. That night, I came in early for my shift. I'd brought some new equipment, an infrared thermometer, an EMF meter I'd borrowed from a friend who did amateur ghost hunting, and a better camera than my phone. "You okay, Mike?" Dave asked when he saw my bag of gear. "You've seemed on edge lately." "I'm fine," I said, just being thorough. The first few hours of my shift were quiet. I kept all the monitors up, watching for any sign of movement. The EMF meter sat silent on my desk. The temperature readings stayed steady. At 2:46 a.m., the meter suddenly spiked. All the hairs on my arm stood up. The air felt thick, like right before a thunderstorm. I checked the monitors. 9th floor, by the window. There it was. The figure seemed more solid than before, less like a shadow and more like something real. My hands were steady as I grabbed my camera and headed for the elevator. Whatever this thing was, I was going to get proof. The 9th floor was colder than usual. My breath fogged in front of my face as I stepped out of the elevator. The EMF meter in my pocket was going crazy, the display showing readings off the scale. I moved quietly through the darkness, camera ready. The figure was still there, a black silhouette against the city lights outside. As I got closer, I could see it wasn't quite touching the floor. It hovered about an inch above the carpet. 20 feet away. 15. 10. The temperature dropped with every step. At 5 feet, I raised the camera. The figure turned. I froze. Where its face should have been was just absence. A void that hurt my eyes to look at. My chest felt tight, like all the air was being sucked away. The camera slipped from my numb fingers. The figure moved, not walking but gliding closer. The darkness around it seemed to spread, reaching out like smoke. I stumbled backwards, fumbling for my flashlight. The beam passed right through the figure. It kept coming. 3 feet away now. The cold was unbearable, my lungs burned. The darkness was creeping into the edges of my vision. My back hit the wall. The figure loomed over me, that horrible empty face inches from mine. I could feel it pulling at something inside me, like it was trying to draw out my breath, my heat, my life. I closed my eyes and slid down the wall, my legs giving out. The cold penetrated to my bones. I couldn't breathe. The radio on my belt crackled. "Mike? You up there?" Motion sensor just went off on 9. The voice seemed to break whatever hold the figure had on me. I gasped in a lungful of air and opened my eyes. It was gone. The temperature was already rising. The EMF meter had gone quiet. "I'm here," I managed to say into the radio. "All clear. Just checking something." My hands were shaking so bad I could barely pick up the camera. When I reviewed the footage later, all I got was static. I've put in my 2 weeks' notice. Let someone else work the night shift. Let someone else try to explain the cold spots, the EMF spikes, the dark figure that stands by the windows and stares out at the city with its void of a face. But sometimes I wonder, what is it looking for? What does it see out there in the darkness? And what would have happened if Dave hadn't radioed when he did? I still drive past the Meridian building sometimes, usually late at night when I can't sleep. I always check the windows, floor by floor. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see something. A shadow darker than darkness standing perfectly still, staring down at the street below. I don't stop anymore. I don't look too long. But I know it's there, waiting. Maybe for another maintenance worker. Maybe for another security guard. Maybe for anyone who stays too late and looks too closely at the shapes in the darkness. All I know is, I'm done with night shifts. Let someone else investigate the figure in the window. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. The first light went out at 2:17 a.m. I checked my watch twice because that's what you do when something doesn't make sense. I'd worked security at Riverside Tower for 3 years, and the motion sensors never failed. But there it was. The fluorescent panel at the far end of the east corridor on the 14th floor just went dark. No warning, no flicker, just darkness. I sat up straighter in my chair at the security desk, eyes fixed on the monitor. The hallway stretched out in crisp black and white on the screen. Empty. The motion sensor showed no activity, but then the next light panel dimmed and died, and the next. Like dominoes falling in slow motion, creating a wave of darkness moving toward the camera. My hand reached for the radio clipped to my belt. The plastic was cold against my palm. "Bill, you up on 14? Bill worked maintenance, usually spent nights fixing whatever broke during business hours. Static crackled. "Negative, John. Down in the basement checking the boiler." My throat went dry. "Any scheduled work on the lighting system?" "Nope. Problems?" I watched another light go out. "Maybe. I'll check it out." The weight of my flashlight felt reassuring against my hip as I stood. My boots squeaked against the polished floor of the lobby. The night shift was always quiet. Just me, Bill somewhere in the building's guts, and 23 floors of empty offices. The elevator ride to 14 felt longer than usual. My reflection in the steel doors looked tired. Dark circles under my eyes. 3-day stubble I needed to take care of. The elevator chimed. 14. I stepped out into the main corridor, my hand automatically moving to rest on my flashlight. The air felt different up here, colder than it should be. The building's temperature control was automated, kept every floor at exactly 72 degrees day and night, but I could see my breath. Down the hall to my right, the lights were still out, creating a pool of darkness that shouldn't be there. The emergency lights hadn't kicked in, which meant the circuit breaker hadn't tripped. This was something else. My boots made soft sounds against the carpet as I walked toward the dark section. The fluorescent panels above me hummed normally, but 20 feet ahead, silence. No hum, no light, just emptiness. I pulled out my flashlight and clicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the gray carpet, the beige walls, the closed office doors. Nothing out of place. I swept the light back and forth as I walked. The carpet showed no footprints besides my own. A soft click behind me. I spun around. Another light had gone out closer to where I stood. My heart rate picked up. The darkness was moving again, spreading both ways now, ahead of me and behind. Click, click, click. 3 more panels went dark. I keyed my radio. Bill, I need you up here, now. Static answered. I tried again. Nothing. The cold intensified. My fingers felt stiff around the flashlight. Click, click. The darkness crept closer, panel by panel. I backed up, keeping my light trained on the carpet ahead of me. Still no signs of anyone else. No footprints, no shadows except my own. My back hit the wall. I glanced left. Darkness. Right. Darkness closing in. Only a small circle of fluorescent light remained above me. The flashlight beam seemed weaker now, barely penetrating the unnatural black. The last panel flickered. I heard something then. A sound like breathing, but wrong. Too slow. Too deep. The kind of breath that comes from something bigger than human lungs. The light above me died. My flashlight beam provided the only illumination now, and it was definitely weaker. The battery was fresh. I'd changed it at the start of my shift. But the darkness seemed to be eating the light, swallowing it. The breathing sound grew closer. I swept the beam in an arc around me. Nothing, but I could feel something there, just beyond where my light could reach. The air grew colder still. Frost started forming on the walls. My radio crackled. Through the static, I heard Bill's voice. John, where are you? The power readings for 14 are going crazy. I raised the radio to my mouth, but before I could respond, something moved at the edge of my light beam. Not a shadow. Shadows don't move against darkness. This was more like a void, a place where the darkness was somehow darker. It shifted like oil underwater, formless but with purpose. I ran. The flashlight beam bounced wildly as I sprinted down the hall toward the elevator. The darkness followed, flowing along the walls and ceiling. The breathing sound grew louder, filling the corridor with its wrong rhythm. My fingers fumbled with the elevator call button. Nothing happened. No light, no hum of machinery. I turned toward the emergency stairs instead. The door handle was ice cold, burning against my palm as I yanked it open. The stairwell lights were out too. I pointed my flashlight down. The beam barely illuminated the first few steps. The breathing echoed in the concrete space, coming from above and below now. Multiple sources, multiple things, I had no choice. I started down, keeping one hand on the railing, moving as fast as I dared. The metal rail grew colder under my palm. Frost spread ahead of me, crackling as it formed. 10 floors down. 9. 8. The darkness followed, flowing down the walls like water. My flashlight grew dimmer with each floor. The beam was barely there now, a faint glow that illuminated nothing. Something brushed against my shoulder. Cold. Colder than ice. Colder than anything I'd ever felt. My arm went numb. The flashlight slipped from my fingers, clattering down the stairs into the darkness. Its weak light vanished. I ran blind now, counting steps, praying I wouldn't miss one. The breathing surrounded me. Close. Getting closer. The cold seeped into my bones. Another touch on my back. My legs went numb. I fell, catching myself against the wall. The concrete felt like frozen steel under my hands. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. The lobby was 4 floors down, just 4 more floors. I pushed myself up, forced my legs to move. The darkness pressed in, solid now, like being underwater. Each breath was harder than the last. The air felt thick, resistant. Something grabbed my ankle. I kicked, felt nothing solid, but the grip remained. The cold spread up my leg. I couldn't feel my foot anymore. Then my calf. Then my knee. I threw myself forward, half falling down the next flight of stairs. The grip broke. I stumbled, caught the railing, kept moving. The breathing was right behind me now. Heavy. Hungry. 3 floors. 2. The darkness was total. I couldn't even see my hand in front of my face. But I could feel them around me. Spaces where the darkness had weight and presence. They moved like sharks circling prey. 1 floor to go. My legs were lead weights, each step a battle against exhaustion and cold. The numbness had spread to my hips. My chest felt frozen. Each breath sent daggers of ice through my lungs. I hit the lobby door at full speed, slamming it open. Light flooded my vision. Blessed, normal, fluorescent light. I stumbled forward, gasping. Behind me, the darkness boiled in the doorway but didn't advance. The breathing sound faded. I collapsed onto the lobby floor, shaking uncontrollably. Frost covered my uniform, already melting in the warm air. I couldn't feel my legs or my left arm. My radio crackled. John, where are you? The power's stabilizing, but something weird is happening up there. I keyed the radio with trembling fingers. Lobby, I managed. Get down here now. Bill found me there 10 minutes later, still unable to stand. He called an ambulance despite my protests. The paramedics diagnosed severe hypothermia. Couldn't explain how I'd developed it inside a climate-controlled building. I quit the next day. Couldn't face another night shift, another dark corridor. But I watched the news about Riverside Tower. 3 months later, a cleaning crew member disappeared from the 14th floor. They found his cart in the east corridor, covered in frost. 6 months after that, an office worker staying late vanished. The security cameras showed the lights going out one by one, just like that night. They never found her. Sometimes I drive past the building late at night. I always look up at the 14th floor. Sometimes the lights are on, everything normal. But sometimes I see darkness moving behind the windows. And if I listen carefully, I can hear breathing. Deep, slow, hungry breathing, carried on the wind. I don't work night shifts anymore. And I always leave the lights on. When people ask why I left security work, I tell them I wanted better hours. It's easier than explaining what happened. Easier than admitting that something impossible lives in that building. Easier than remembering the sound of that breathing. But sometimes, on cold nights when I'm alone, I look at the shadows in the corners of my room and wonder if they're darker than they should be. I listen for breathing that's too slow, too deep. And I remember the lesson I learned that night. Darkness isn't empty. Sometimes it hungers. Sometimes it hunts. I keep a flashlight by my bed now. The battery's always fresh. But sometimes, when I click it on in the middle of the night, the beam seems weaker than it should be, like something's eating the light. Those nights I lie awake until dawn, watching the shadows, waiting, listening, remembering the cold. They never did fix the lights on the 14th floor. The maintenance logs show dozens of attempts. New wiring, new panels, new everything. But the lights still go out, one by one, moving like something's walking down that corridor. I've thought about telling someone in authority. The police, the building owners, anyone. But who would believe me? What would I say? That the darkness is alive? That it hunts? That it's patient and cold and hungry? So I stay quiet. I work my day job. I avoid tall buildings. I keep the lights on. But sometimes when I'm driving home late and I pass Riverside Tower, I look up at the 14th floor. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see a face in one of those dark windows. Not a human face. Just a darker patch of shadow, shaped like features, pressed against the glass. It watches me drive past. And I swear, even through the closed windows of my car, even over the sound of traffic and wind, I can hear breathing. I drive faster those nights. But I know it doesn't matter. Because now I understand something that most people don't. The darkness doesn't need to chase you, it just needs to wait.